Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your patience and our apologies for tardiness this evening. We have 4 committee meetings this evening, followed by council. And we're delighted to see so many people joining us tonight on such a beautiful night. We'll begin with the Finance and Environment Committee meeting. We'll begin with agenda additions and approval. We have these pink correspondences from Bev Bacon regarding the tree management bylaw. The pink indicating that we received these in the last couple of days and didn't have time to include them in the formal agenda package. The agenda with the additions of the pinks for item 6B. Is there anything else for the agenda tonight?
No, move adoption.
Move adoption. Councillor Little, seconded by Councillor Epp. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. We have no presentations, so we have an opportunity now for public participation. As usual, I'll remind people, this is largely for public participation on items on the Finance and Environment Committee agenda. If you want to have your say about items on, say, the Parks agenda or the Council agenda, we'd ask you to save it till then. If you're not sure where it belongs, then step right up. You have 4 minutes. And please begin with your name and address. So, public participation for Finance and Environment Committee, please.
Good evening, Bev Bacon, Metchosin resident, and I want to compliment Council for being so tolerant with listening to us. And I apologize for filling up your inboxes with my missives. You have 3 of my missives this time round. I was inspired to write to you about the value of trees, having read the recent CBC article, which is copied to you as a pink, and I borrowed a lot from that. And I didn't know at that time that the tree management bylaw, as you call it, was going to be discussed at this council meeting. So I'm wildly excited that we're moving forward at last on this. And it's been time. I think I've been coming to council meetings for 20 years asking for us to revise the tree cutting bylaw because it was just way out of sync with our values. And this fits in so well with preparing for the heat dome and being and adapting to climate change and our climate emergency, actually. And it's simple. The trees can save us, and we have to protect the trees. So the need to protect I'm going to read from something I wrote you. The need to protect our forests and also our individual trees has never been this great. It's beyond frustrating for me that the District of Metchosin still treats trees as disposable assets. There seems to be an attitude here that we have lots of trees. Well, lots of trees are why we breathe clean air and don't suffer too much from extreme heat. I'd like us to recognize the true value of trees in terms of climate adaptation. I'm asking for swift action to prohibit cutting of trees on private property, except where an individual tree is a hazard or there is no way to build a house and leave it standing. Falling trees to make lumber or firewood, healthy trees, especially mature healthy trees, should not happen in Metchosin, not now. And we have to make up for the deficit of Langford and Colwood too. We were the last green place here. And if I say this often, if you bought a treed acreage, must be what you wanted. To review the services a tree provides, and when I was teaching primary school, my children could cite this chapter and verse. They provide shade and shelter, cool air temperature, reduce air pollution, store carbon, maintain biodiversity, mitigate stormwater runoff, stabilize slopes, and buffer against wind and noise. You'd have to pay a lot to have built structures do all of that. Mature trees can reduce summer daytime temperatures by as much as 10 degrees, and I got that out of this CBC article. And if you walk into our forest, you can feel that. But our parks are not enough. We have to protect the trees on private properties as well. And I have ideas for how we can do that. Cutting down mature trees and planting seedlings, or young trees, is not going to be helpful in our lifetime. Trees are very slow growing. It's definitely worth planting more trees, but the trees we plant now will be good for future generations. And so the whole part about, you plant a new tree for the tree you take down, that just doesn't wash. So when I got the agenda package, I went over what the tree cutting bylaw now says and the notes in the margin from MEASC, and I think MEASC is down in forces right now because of people on vacation. So I don't think they spent a whole lot of time on it, and certainly it deserves more time and attention. And I think it needs a complete rewrite, a complete revamping with a different purpose in mind. So here are my comments after this exercise. I realize that tweaking the bylaw is not what we need. We need the tree cutting bylaw to be replaced with the tree preservation bylaw. Or I like what Andy just said, the tree management bylaw. That works for me too, but I don't want to suggest that cutting is something that we do. The tree cutting bylaw should just say don't. So the gist of what the tree preservation bylaw would say in my mind is, don't cut down trees outside the building envelope unless they are certified as hazard trees. Every tree to be cut down requires a permit. The permit fee is X number of dollars, and make it high enough to cover staff cost for monitoring. Every permit should have a big enough fee that it covers staff time, so the rest of us aren't subsidizing it. It should come from the person that's applying for the permit. So a permit fee big enough. 1 minute left, okay. And this bylaw, we'd have to say that it pertains to all the trees in Metchosin that are not otherwise under a provincial regulation. For every tree cut down, and I would say including your building envelope, you pay X number of dollars to the District of Metchosin to put that money in our land acquisition fund so that we can use the money to buy an area that has mature trees. So we're trading mature trees for mature trees. We need to forget the nonsense of, as it says, cutting, you can cut 50 trees per acre per year. Well, those are the small trees, and 10 big trees per acre per year. If people actually did that, we'd have nothing left. And who's going to monitor that? And the nonsense that you have to replace trees with certain kinds of trees, and that you have an obligation to water and fertilize said trees for 3 years. Well, who the heck is going to monitor that? It's just pie in the sky. We need mature trees for mature trees taken down, and the best way we can do it is buy pieces of forest, and we need money for that. We need steep fines for cutting trees without a permit, just about done. We need to include the warning that unpaid fines can be added to property tax, and we have the authority to do that. I don't know what land we have in Metchosin designated as managed forests for lumber and firewood, and I know that's a provincial thing. It may be necessary for us to approach the provincial government about having that designation in Metchosin removed or phased out.
Bev, if you could wrap
Yeah,
up, that would be great.
a paragraph.
Okay.
I appreciate that Council and MEASC are looking at updating the tree cutting bylaw, In this time of climate crisis and biodiversity collapse, we need to save our trees for the environmental services they provide. This is a time to make a bold and significant change away from looking at healthy trees as assets to be harvested for fiber and or sacrificed for view. The tree preservation bylaw could be the single most important thing we do as a district in mitigating and adapting to climate change. What's our climate plan? No net loss of mature trees. All mature trees protected for conservation purposes. Incentives and leadership for property owners and other residents to contribute to tree conservation areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev.
Jay Shukin, Laban Road resident, and just speaking as myself as an individual right now. Excuse me. Two matters I wanted to raise tonight. One is whether there is an update on discussions with the RCMP on policing costs, if there was time to share any update you might have. The second is I too wanted to comment on the comments on from MIASC on the tree cutting bylaw, which it is referred to as tree cutting bylaw in the document itself. And to me, the most dramatic point of the comments there were from you, Councillor McKinnon, suggesting that any tree being cut should have a permit with it. And I have to confess, when I saw that first, I had a really negative reaction. And it took me some time to figure out why that was, because we're a pretty tree positive household. Case in point, we have probably 60 Gary oaks that we've grown from acorn all through our property, and we're always looking for more to plant. But I did some thinking and came to understand what the reluctance was, and there's two parts to this. The first, as Bev was saying, this is a very significant policy change. And to make it meaningful and effective, it strikes me that there has to be a clear rationale and reason upon which to communicate this to residents and to the public. And to me, that means developing a rationale through a climate action plan. There are many reasons to not mindlessly and carelessly cut down trees, and Bev listed those very effectively. And especially in an age where in a localized climate emergency, and we see it almost every week, the role of trees in sequestering carbon and keeping our places cool, obviously that's paramount. But to connect that policy change and to make it effective, there does have to be a rationale and something to communicate effectively to the public. So it strikes me that there is much more work that needs to be done simply than just changing the bylaw. So a climate action plan and the development of such, I think, is an appropriate way to go. The second is enforcement. The new enforcement policy is yet to be adopted, and most importantly, it is yet to be test-driven. So, I worry that unless we really understand what enforcement means with this policy, and we're confident in how we're going to take that on, what seems like a bold and decisive action on paper is actually going to be just a mockery in practicality. So my suggestion to yourself, and maybe to MIASC as well, is look at developing the climate action plan and then nesting the bylaw within the values that we develop through that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay. Other public participation for Finance and Environment Committee? All right, seeing none, let's move on to the adoption of the minutes of Finance and Environment Committee of June the 6th. I'll move adoption. Second. Seconded by Mayor Rands. All in favor? Opposed? That passes. And receipt of minutes from MIASC of June 28th. And again, I'm the liaison to MIASC, so I'll move receipt of those minutes.
Second that.
Seconded by Councillor Epp. Any discussion? No? All in favor? Opposed? All right. That passes. Business arising. This is one of our cross-committee business arising items here in the Parks Committee meeting of June the 13th. There was an action item to refer the request for payment of Blaney Trail youth volunteers to the next Finance and Environment Committee meeting. Now, I talked to Jennifer Burgess about this so we could get a bit more information on this request. Jennifer says that was a request for some financial consideration of the watering of Blaney Trail. Hopefully I can enlist another small team of neighborhood youth who did watering in the past. Watered twice a week for 1 hour, volunteers 44 hours, and paid youth 36.5 hours. All costs 2021 April to end of August, soil, plantings, watering came to $416.69. This year the plantings have not required any watering so far as they are getting more established. Not sure what stipend I can negotiate with youth this year. Jennifer. So my first question is, do we have funding in parks for this? Do you know Councillor Little? Or?
I don't know that. I didn't know I had funding in parks to use, actually. If I do, I'll spend it. And,
Okay.
and it should be referred to as Blaney Park. It's a park now.
Right, Blaney Park. I shall let Jennifer know to call it such. Discussion on this item. How would you like to proceed on it? Yes, Councillor Little.
Did you want to say something, Lisa?
Well, I believe that there's 6,000 budgeted every year for maintenance of general parks in the area, but the chair and the trails coordinator sort of manage that budget. So if we were to take it from the maintenance budget, we should be checking it.
There may be some opposition to that because the mayor had accepted responsibility for the cutting of the trees at the Blaney Trail. It was the Blaney Trail. That was in January of 2019. So the remediation of the Blaney Trail would not have needed to happen had the trees not been cut. And so I think you will have significant opposition from the parks. I can't speak for the parks chair nor the trails coordinator, but I suspect you will have opposition to using money that they're using for maintenance of other trails and parks for this, because it wasn't their responsibility that the trees were cut. And as noted in the Metchosin News, the mayor accepted full responsibility, so I think it should come out of another budget.
Okay. Rather than anticipating that response, can we add it to the agenda for the next PTASK meeting?
Yes, I'll ask the chair. I'm sure he'll be happy to entertain that on his agenda.
All right. Would that be an acceptable action for this committee? Refer this to PTASK for their comments? All
Yeah,
right,
sounds good.
I'll make that motion. Would somebody like to second that? Seconded by Mayor Rands. All in favor? Opposed? All right, we'll go to PTASK. Okay, MEASK recommendations. So we have 3 recommendations from MEASK here under Business Arising 6B. The first is that we host a workshop this fall with Western Canada Marine Response Corporation, jointly with MEASK. And you'll recall in the letter that Metchosin sent to WCMRC, we indicated that we would like to have more engagement with them to find out what happened to a lot of our recommendations that didn't appear in their final report, and have an opportunity to continue the discussion with the Western Canada Marine Response Corporation. Now this says Finance and Environment Committee to host a workshop in the autumn. I'm not sure if that's the appropriate group to host a workshop. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, we are an excellent committee and all that.
Providing that it's open to the public, I think it's a grand idea. It is the
Yeah, it would
finance and
definitely have to
environment.
be
right.
open to the public.
Yeah, I think it's a grand idea. It wouldn't have to be hosted by the council, I don't think.
I will follow up with WCMRC on that. You'll recall in their response letter, they indicated that they'd be open to hosting a workshop here. And we suggested perhaps this autumn. So I'll bring it back to MEASC and we'll organize the next steps, and I will contact Michael Lowry of WCMRC and tell him that we're going to do that. Is that good? Okay. Any other thoughts on that matter before we move on? All right, item number 2. Concern was raised by community resident above and beyond the risk of oil spills from tankers transiting the strait. Concerns related to freighter anchoring and movement through local waters. That went to, those concerns were relayed to MEASC, and they suggested, given that this is Transport Canada responsibility, that we might want to consider drafting a letter to Transport Canada to express our concerns. I guess my initial response would be, it would be nice to see a draft letter coming from MEASC that we could work from, rather than simply this recommendation, but I'll open it up to the committee at this point. Your thoughts? Mayor Rance?
This, I think, is a little bit premature to consider this would be a council mandate. We had one expression of concern about freighters anchoring and dragging their anchors. I'm not convinced that the majority of the residents of this community would perhaps agree or disagree. I mean, we just don't know that. We're talking about commerce. We're talking about the essential nature of the commerce that comes through shipping into this region. And I have yet to see any examples of harm being caused by those freighters being anchored there. So I think that this is a bigger picture, more complex than just simply writing a letter saying we don't like the idea of freighters sitting there. And one that requires a broader community discussion, or at least a direction to council before we start writing letters.
All right, Mayor Rance, Councillor Epp.
Yeah, I'd like to see something a little more scientific pertaining to, the damage that is caused to the ocean bottom by the anchors and other issues that might be, because obviously there's something that, we do need to have in our waters if we expect to keep our stores and other places full of supplies. So before, I think, any kind of an opinion letter, we do need to find out a few more facts about what we're actually dealing with there.
All right. May I suggest, as a way of addressing this concern that doesn't involve us writing a letter, because I think those are excellent concerns that have been raised by Councillor Epp and Mayor Rance, that we add this to the agenda for our workshop with WCMRC this autumn, see what their thoughts are on this issue and whether they've dealt with any concerns there. The group that responds to marine spills here, and see if they've been dealing with any concerns regarding these issues. Yes, Councillor Little?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Epp. Just because something isn't measured or monitored, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And it's just because it's not documented. It may be documented in other places, and we could extrapolate to the Salish Sea. As I mentioned at the last meeting when the WCMRC were here, you just have to mention the name of Exxon Valdez, and that's why a lot of the regulations have been changed and tweaked. But if there was a significant oil spill, it would ruin the 50 plus kilometers of coastline that we have here. It would ruin our lifestyle here. I think this does deserve a response, and perhaps the workshop is a good place because we'd be able to monitor, or not monitor, but check the temperature of the participants, if that would be palatable to send a letter. Yeah, and also, if we are going to be talking about a climate plan in the future, this would fold into that as well. And so I am in favor of writing a letter. And we sometimes do write letters without public consent. I mean, they elect us to make decisions on their behalf, and that's what we do. I'm not really convinced that we need the public to say, yes, we're happy with you advocating for us and our coastal waters. I actually am in favor of us writing a letter now, but I will be, if it is the wish of the council to wait until September, so be it.
All right. We have a recommendation from MEASC to draft a letter to Transport Canada about this. I will make that motion for the purpose of having a vote. Can I get someone to second that, please? This recommendation that yes, Mayor Rands will second it. All in favor of drafting that letter? And opposed? Okay, that.
Opposed of drafting the letter?
Right now, yes. I think for the reasons that Mayor Rands and Councillor Epp have expressed. Okay, so we have 3 opposed and 1 in favor. Councillor Little. Okay, thank you for that. And then the third is simply the receipt of the MEASC track changes to the tree management bylaw, which are mostly mine, I think, which is fair enough because I think I did a lot of the last bylaw too, because I'm a tree guy. Just to put a bit of context around this, we are in the process under the leadership of Planning Committee of revisiting and revising our bylaws here in Metchosin, and Councillor Kahakawila, who is unable to join us tonight, has indicated that the tree management bylaw will be near the top of the list. So comments from Bev Bacon, comments from MEASC, and comments from a future workshop that will involve whatever community members want to attend will all be used in revising the tree management bylaw. Okay, so that's just a bit of context around the MEASC comments, around Bev's comments, and others, Jay's comments. Yes, Councillor Little.
So when would you like our comments? Now or at the end of the review process?
Now or at the end would both work.
So we'll get a copy of this sent to us by staff?
Sure.
Electronic copy?
Yes. Yeah. Let's send a digital copy of the draft bylaw with the MEASC review comments on it. Would that be what you would like to work from?
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, let's do that, please. Okay, that brings us to number 7, reports. We have our annual request from the West Shore RCMP Detachment for community policing and employee funding on pages 25 and 26. This year's total request is $2,914 to fund these. In some ways, I would like to see this simply incorporated in the general police budget so that we don't have to consider it separately each year, but I'm prepared to recommend, I will move that we provide this funding, and if I can get a seconder, we can have a discussion here.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Little. Discussion on this request. No? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? That passes. Next up, correspondence from Bev Bacon, Climate Adaptation and Trees. Yep, we have, I think, considered that, and that's going to be considered when we're doing our revisions to the tree management bylaw, Bev. All right. And then secondly, we have a thank you letter from the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission. So I'll accept the motion to receive both those last two correspondences.
Motion to receive.
Councillor Little, seconded by Councillor F. All in favor? Opposed? And that brings us to the end of the agenda. Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Mayor Rand, seconded by Councillor Little. All in favor? Opposed? We are